All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. The topic for today is to warm up your Today's topic is going to be about how do we warm up our cold calls. In other words, before you get on the phone and start making cold calls, what can you do in order to prepare for that? Set your mind to the right, to the right mood or the right mindset, so that it's a little bit easier on you when you actually, start making the calls. A lot of us that have been in the recruiting industry for a long time, especially those of us who maybe have started in sales or had sales experience as well, or where you do both, you run a full desk, we're not afraid of the phone, but it is getting a lot more difficult because people just don't answer the phone. And when they do, it's, people are they would rather a lot of times text or email. So let's talk about a couple of ways that we can change things around a little bit and warm them up. I want to start with just talking a little bit about how to kind of set things up. So before you call, prepare before you call. And I want to also define what I'm talking about when I'm referring to cold calling here. So basically, we are talking about calling candidates that are not expecting calls from us. So this is not telephone sourcing. We're kind of following on the momentum of telephone sourcing from our last session, but now we're actually talking to the candidate themselves rather than finding out where the candidates work or who their hiring managers are or the organizational chart, etc. We're now talking to the people that we discovered. But the difference is that these are passive candidates. And I don't want to get into a political discussion about passive, active, whatever. We know that there's a spectrum of activity, and we know that there are passive candidates that become active and etc. But what I'm referring to here are candidates that are simply not expecting to hear from you. So they're not applying for a job. They're not in your ATS. Or if they are in your ATS, they applied for a job a long time ago or etc. These are also people that you may have found on LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn, they don't have the I'm looking for opportunities or open to work icon. So that's who we're talking about here. Right, back to the point. You want to improve your cold call conversion rate. And the reason for that is you want to make fewer calls. In other words, make fewer calls, have material ready before you make the calls so that you are able to make the most out of time with a candidate. The objective is to spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes with the individual that actually answers the phone to make a determination whether or not this is someone you want to move forward. If you need to do a deeper dive and you have a full phone screen, then by all means, proceed after that. But right now, we're just getting to the point where we're determining if there's interest both sides. So that's the objective here. I'm not talking about everything else that happens after that. So first things first, prepare for the call. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Secondly, stand up and smile when you initiate the call at the very beginning. I'll explain that a little bit as well. And then third, in order to get back up to speed with cold calling, if you haven't done it in a while and you're going to start sourcing passive candidates and you know you're going to need to make cold calls, I have a little bit of a exercise plan or a workout plan with some evolutions to help you improve your cold calling over time. Don't expect to just get right back on the phone like you would, riding a bike, right? It's more like going back to the gym after I haven't been in a while. You're going to need to kind of prepare again. So prepare before the call. What I like to do is I like to have impressive, exciting facts about my company. You want to call this, you could call this the elevator pitch. You could call this the value proposition. You could call this basically whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter what you call it. The idea here is that at the very beginning, you're going to have some time to explain to the candidate or the prospect a little bit about who your company is. And you don't have a lot of time. So you want to use the things that are going to be most immediately impactful. Here on the screen, you see on the PowerPoint, you see, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. You see a bunch of things that you should know before you start dialing. So what I call exciting and interesting is things that stand out, things that are unique about this company that you can't really find anywhere else, right? So, don't say benefits, okay? Everybody has benefits. Everybody has benefits. However, do you have absolutely amazing, spectacular benefits? Okay, that's cool. If you have elder care, do you have pet care? Do you have things that really stand out? That's fine, do that. Make a little list of a few bullet points and keep in mind that some people are motivated in different ways than others. In other words, you might have people that are more motivated by elder care and people that are more motivated by pet care. You might also have people that are more motivated by causes. So have a few bullet points, like what cause do your company support? I should say what causes, hopefully it's more than one, does your company support? And what volunteering does your organization do, for example? So what about the company is impressive or exciting? Call that the big picture, okay? So my company, my client, this employer is awesome because, it's exciting because, bullet, bullet, bullet. Doesn't need to be anything that is revealing, that may not know, but you want to be able to get behind it. The second level down, let's call that the middle picture, is what is interesting or appealing about this team, this department. So the bigger company at large may be the leader in medical devices or the top firm of its industry. Now we're talking about this particular team. Does this team leader have a strong reputation as a trainer, a coach? Are they a good manager to work for if you're looking for career development? Is this a manager that is easy to work with? Or what are the salient bullet points, one or two bullet points about this manager, so that when the candidate asks you about that, you can give them a couple of bullet points and you don't have to think about it. Again, you want to minimize the amount of time that you spend on the phone hemming and hawing. Okay, so big picture, the company. We are the best at this. We're number one. We're the emerging company solving this problem. Then this team, this manager, the colleagues, the peers, the type of work, something like that. And then a little bit deeper is, what is it about this role, this particular job, that's critical to the success of the company? Here is where you need to connect the job with the candidate's motivation. What do I mean by that? I mean, every job, doesn't matter what job, from the CEO down to the the engineering, the custodial engineering staff, every single job has value and contributes to the success of the company. It's your responsibility to figure out how and connect the dots. The hiring manager may not be able to tell you or may not know how to phrase it in the right way. This is your job to translate it for them. So connect the dots. This position is critical because without, let's say it's a salesperson, okay, I'm giving myself an easy one here. Without revenue, the company doesn't make any money, right? Duh, okay. Without a contract attorney, we end up, in situations with clients that we don't want to be in, could have been prevented, et cetera. So what's critical? It doesn't matter what the job is. Look, the reality is this. If a company is spending its money, it's paying for somebody, there's a reason for that. They're not going to just give money away. They want something in return. And every company is going to look at the return on investment for their employees in different ways, but there's definitely some return on investment. Sure, it's easy when that's a salesperson, but when it's a recruiter, hey, if we don't hire for this position, we won't be able to fill all of our jobs. And that means that we won't be able to produce all our product or sell all our. So tie it to that. All right, big picture, what's really different, interesting, unique about the company, causes, benefits that are different, etc. When I used to be at Fiserv, and I was there for 5 years, I loved to talk about Fiserv having been in the world's most admired companies 7 years in a row, because that's a tough one to do. And that was a good one, but not everybody cares about that. So for people who cared about cause, example, I talked about finance and financial education. Fiserv big on educating the youth on financial responsibilities, even making it easy for children to create bank accounts and things like that. So those are the three: big, middle, and small. If you have trouble figuring out what the EVP is, what the pitch is, think about it from the perspective of, if you're the one receiving the call, what would make you call this person back if they left you a message with this information, right? Try to sell yourself. You need to believe it. Second piece, besides these three, is what are the current events circulating about your company? Okay, so this is everything that's out there in the news, good or bad. Obviously, if you have some good stories, some good wins, we just won a major contract, that's good, but also be familiar with the bad. Has there been a layoff? Are there lawsuits? Do you have some bad reviews on Glassdoor? I worked with, let's just say, the largest retailer in the world. I don't want to name names, but this was a client that I was doing some consulting with, and the largest retailer in the world, you can probably connect the dots. And at the time, they had been recently in the news a lot because they had lost a major class action lawsuit. And when I was working with the recruiters, they would bring this up and say, well, what do I do when a candidate asks me about that? It's a really, it's a negative thing. Hey, your company just, got busted in a major class action. How do I handle that? Well, I got to tell you, I gave them a couple of what I think are pretty good ideas, but there was a person in the audience that, as I was, asking, so what would you do? How are you answering the question? There was this one individual who, by the way, is blind, and he is a blind recruiter. Now he's moved on in a leadership position, but he blew me away because this is what he said. He said, oh, that's easy. When a candidate brings that up, here's what I tell them. I tell them, when you're the biggest company on the planet and you stand out, people are going to challenge you, right? These things are happening because we are big and we stand out. So that's why this is happening. And if you want to make a difference, you can join us and help change that from inside. And I was like, darn, that's a really good one, right? I mean, I like that a lot. But the point is, even if, your company just, let's take BP, for example. Oops, we just drilled into some oil and we killed the planet. Obviously, that wasn't exactly what happened, but you get the point. People are still going to need to know. So when you're talking to a candidate, don't get caught off guard by that. So one of the things I do is I create Google alerts. So you go to google.com/alerts and type in some keywords like, for example, the name of your company and headlines or news or et cetera. And that'll send you top articles about your organization. You can even add the names of products, divisions, even your top, hiring managers, leaders, et cetera. This way you'll be informed. All right, so you got big, medium, small. You got current news about your company, both the good and the bad. What would prompt you to call someone back? And then the last piece here is, if you were stuck in an elevator. This is the elevator pitch, or the EVP. Some people call it elevator pitch. If you were stuck in an elevator for 30 seconds, I guess that doesn't mean you'd be stuck. You'd be like, if you're in an elevator and you're in between floors and all you have is 30 seconds and someone says, so what do you do? What can you say in those 30 seconds that will pique their curiosity and make that person want to listen to a little bit more? What is that about the company? Now, that could be the big, the middle, or the small ideas. But here is, for example, we're the largest router manufacturer in the world, or we're the most known or the most respected brand in financial services, etc. So that's what you want to put out there, right? That's the feeling that you want to have. So if the person says, well, why should I come work for your company? And by the way, this actually happens to me a lot. I've had candidates on the phone say, well, why should I be interested in this company when there's so many other companies out there? Okay, so that hasn't happened recently, but it has happened a lot. This is how I answer it. You know, I have this brief pitch. At Fiserv, it was, well, it's really difficult to be world's most admired 7 years in a row, so we must be doing something right. And then if they are interested, I can go more, right? Question for you: where would you look for compelling descriptions of the work that your company is doing? I know we can't have a conversation here. I mean, I'm happy to bring somebody on if you have something to say. I'd be happy to add you to the live studio here. But think about, where can you find this information? Now, Krishna has a question. When a recruiter knows the company is not good, Krishna, can you tell me what you mean by not good? Is it because the company is evil? I mean, what exactly happened, right? How do you establish credibility with a candidate? That's a good question. But, you know, there's the example of the class action lawsuit. Okay, so look, we made a mistake. We got caught doing something that we didn't know was happening. We corrected it, and now we're making amends. We're repairing, and here's what we're doing. One of the answers is press releases. About where do you find? Yes, your own company's press releases, your blogs. Believe it or not, if your company is publicly traded, very likely you'll have what's called investor relations page. And that may be different than your PR page. The investor relations page is communication with owners of stock in the company, and the information that they want is a little bit different. It's not the marketing stuff, which is going to be on your press releases page, and that is a good source. But the investor relations is going to have a little bit more information on, say, the financial health, the projections of the company, where are we going, and that can be a little bit more interesting to candidates than the advertising material. Not that the advertising material won't prove useful. Sure, that'll tell you, employer of choice, those kinds of things. But look in the investor relations for what you can talk about publicly, because there may be things that you can't talk about publicly about the company. So that's all about you, your company, etc. Now I'm going to flip the switch a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about the candidate. When I'm making a cold call, I like to have their resume in front of me. You probably already do that. Or I look up their LinkedIn profile. I want to have that in front of me because I want to be able to make a connection. Once we do have a conversation, I want to be able to bring something up that's interesting, that might establish some form of connection between the two of us. Oh, I noticed that you also went to RIT. I went to RIT. Obviously, because I went to RIT, I can say that. So don't make up that you went to the same school. But there may be something in there where they grew up, where they've traveled, their interests, something like that. A former employer, anything like that, to try to make a connection. So know a couple of things about them and have that profile in front of you. And know a couple of things about their employer. As you're making these calls, just Google the name of the company that they work for. Okay, I'm not saying you got to be an expert in every company of every candidate. But if the candidate works at Motorola, you probably know a little bit about what Motorola does. What if the candidate works for a company you've never heard of? Just paste the name into Google and at least get the idea as to what the company does. Because you want to be able to speak intelligently, but you never want to disrespect their current employer. This is a mistake I see recruiters make a lot. When you're talking to a passive candidate, remember, they're not looking. They don't want to leave their company. They're still loyal to their company. Even if they become interested in this conversation and they do genuinely want to talk to you about a position, right? that doesn't mean that they're going to speak ill of their current employer. So be very careful about that. If their company has some bad news, you can frame that as a way to attract them to your company by highlighting the strength your company has in that area, but not by pointing that out. So, for example, the company that they're working at is going through some financial trouble. They've had recent layoffs. Don't bring that up on the call. It's not going to make you friends. It's actually going to do the opposite. But what you could do is talk about the financial health of your company and how you're growing to counterbalance that. Not by saying, hey, you're laying off and we're growing, ha, 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 but more like, one of the things that I like about this company is that, we're currently hiring a lot and we're growing. So now the last little piece is the stand up and smile. All right, so here's the thing. A lot of people who talk about recruiting have taught you that, and they teach you that. But the thing is, most of them have no idea where it comes from. Having been somebody who tried it, and my mind is very skeptical. I always like to question things. I didn't believe it until I did it, and it does work. And then when it worked, then I needed to figure out why it works. So I dug into it. Here's what I found. There is legitimate science behind that. As it turns out, they did some research or comparisons, recording the audio of someone doing their regular phone greeting, sitting down, smiling and sitting down, standing up and not smiling, and standing up and smiling. And there was a difference in the waveform of that person's voice. There was a change in the waveform of the voice. The computer can detect that there's a change. Humans can't detect that there's a change. They just know it sounds a little bit better. And believe it or not, if you superimpose the two waveforms together, you will see in the graphical representation of the waveforms the difference. So there is a physical difference in the way the sound is formed, which makes it slightly more pleasant. This doesn't mean that you have to stand up and force yourself to smile the entire time you're making a cold call. But when you first make that call and you're standing up and smiling and you establish rapport, you can then sit back and relax after that, once you've now made the connection. All right. So let's talk about the cold calling workout. Now you're ready to start dialing. I like to create what I call call blocks, similar to my sourcing sets. So I've got sourcing sets and I've got call blocks. My call blocks are simply chunks of time on my calendar that are basically reserved, blocked out, so that I don't get any meetings booked or people, trying to get in touch with me during that time. And I'll reserve a couple of them throughout the day, one or two throughout the day, several times a week. Do this according to your mood. You may be a morning person, so make your call block, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Be mindful, however, that the candidates that you're calling may have a different work schedule. So don't just assume that the morning hours for you are going to be morning hours for them. So you may have to set up a second call block to reach people that are in a different time zone. For example, if you're in the East Coast and you're a morning person, being up at 7 a.m. is not going to be a very good way to start a conversation with somebody that's in the West Coast. I mean, 4 a.m., I don't know a lot of people that get up that early. I know some people that go to bed at that time, but I don't know a lot of people that get up that early. So what you want to do is plan your cold calling blocks according to your audience. The other thing is you may be calling people that are second shifters or third shifters, obviously, and you may be calling people that are, let's say, for example, in sales. If they're in sales, their prime calling time for business hours is not a good time for you to call them. Call them before. So these people you do want to call early, because most salespeople that I know will prepare their day for an hour or so before they start making calls, before the business day really starts. And that would be a good time to get in touch with them. Maybe that's 7 a.m. for them, or maybe that's after hours. For example, nurses and people that work in hospitals, therapists, etc., they're walking around while they're at work and they're not anywhere near their phone. They might have a cell phone with them, but they're not going to be answering the phone. So for those people, you may want to text and then tell them you'll call them in your text message. Hey, this is Shally. I'm trying to reach you. I know you're probably at work. I'm going to give you a call at blah time. Is that okay? And then they can quickly reply yes or no to that. And now you have an appointment, maybe not a formal appointment. But when you're talking to people that are basically busy during the day, truck drivers, other people that, I mean, we're all busy during the day. What I meant is when they're busy with their hands working during the day and they're not available, you might want to schedule your calls, again, before or after hours. So that's the call block. I create my call blocks and then I prioritize my list. Yes, I have a list. So during this call block, I have a list of people I'm going to call. You can get this out of your CRM or your LinkedIn or whatever. Obviously, you would have had to do the research to get their phone numbers before you did this. So hopefully that's already been done. I should have prefaced this with that. But what I do is I rank my candidates. It's difficult to rank candidates until you've talked to them, but I rank them based on, let's just say, proximity to the target, right? So there may be a handful of companies that the client said, or the hiring manager said, it would be ideal if you get people from these companies. Those will make it to the top of my list. I'll call those people first. There may be a handful of job titles that I know are a perfect match. I'll prioritize those. So any way you can, try to rank them so that the most likely matches will be at the beginning. That way, if you run out of time, you're not running out of time and not able to call the best candidates, right? If you run out of time, hopefully because you're successful and had a few phone screens, then you can reschedule those and they're not as urgent. Now you're going to need probably somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. You could start out with 2 hours. And here is the exercise routine or the evolution. The first time around, what you want to do, and this is in my book, by the way, there's a couple of chapters that deal with cold calling and so on. So if you're interested, look up the sourcing method on my website. I should probably put a link up there. In fact, here, I can do this. If you go there, you can probably find it. All right. So anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is because there's a lot more text there than here. But what I do is I start out with a call block of about 2 hours. And I'll give you my secret weapon. This is my special secret weapon. Okay, it's not so secret anymore because I'm telling 26 people, but the point is, this really works for me. Right before I start my call block, I make 2 calls to complete strangers for no reason at all. I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. By strangers, I mean people that I don't already know, not friends, not relatives. So, and by no reason at all, I mean these are not part of my list of candidates. The best way to identify these people are people who have sent you invitations to connect on LinkedIn. Ever since LinkedIn, that's been a boon for me because that's a really easy one to do. A lot of times they include their contact information, or I can find their contact information, and it's an easy one. Now, do make it relevant, okay? But I'm saying don't have an agenda, meaning don't call to try to close a deal, get a candidate, get a referral, get business. Make it an informal, hey, Patrick, I got your invitation to connect on LinkedIn. Thanks very much. I accepted. I thought maybe I would reach out and take a couple of minutes to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about what I do, and understand what it is that you do and see how I may be able to help you. How does that sound? No, I'm busy. Okay, great. Schedule, no problem. But most of the time people are like, sure, no problem. So good enough. Tell them a couple of things about yourself, ask about them, make some notes, put it in your Outlook or whatever. And I usually have that as a little, what I call VIP folder. Believe it or not, I've made placements from calls like that, not directly, but the person that I spoke with a month later, 2 months later, referred someone that was a good candidate that I hired. I got a job from somebody that I called like that once. Again, not on that call, but I met them. They knew that I was a recruiter. Sometime later, somebody asked them if they knew a recruiter, and they said, sure, I know this guy named Shally. They gave him my business card, electronic digital business card, and then I got a call, believe it or not. So why do we do this? These 2 calls are basically to remove the fear. Because you don't have an agenda, you cannot be rejected. These are people that reached out to you and want to connect. All you're doing is saying, hey, what do you do? Here's what I do. That's it. They really can't say no to that. You can't get rejected. And believe it or not, when you make cold calls and the first call you make is a rejection, things don't go so well after that. At least in my experience, I almost had to take a break and, go get coffee or something. Because as soon as I start calling, the first person I call, tells me to go F off or whatever. Yeah, that kind of puts a damper in the day. So that's how I came up with this. I'm going to start out with a positive. I'm going to make these 2 calls. It'll take me a couple of minutes, and then I dive into my cold calling call block. Here's the thing. The first time you do this, for the first couple of weeks, just get through the 2 hours. Doesn't matter how many people you call. Doesn't matter how many people you convert. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters other than getting through 2 hours of calls. Just dial. Don't let the handset, hit the desk. Don't put the phone down. Just dial the next call, dial the next call, dial the next call. If you're interested in a call automation application that's really inexpensive, shoot me a note and I'll connect you. I can refer you to the owner. I've got a $10 discount that I can apply if I email them directly and introduce you. I don't make any money off of it. I promise you, it's really inexpensive. But what I do is I upload my spreadsheet to it, and it actually makes the dialing for me, so I don't have to sit there and dial the phone numbers. But even if you're doing that, just get through the 2 hours. While you're getting through the 2 hours, document how many calls you made and document how many people you reached. After a couple of weeks of this is your new target. So your evolution is now, the next time around you have a call block, you're not going to commit to fulfilling 2 hours. You're going to commit to whatever the number of connects were that you made on your previous 2 weeks worth of call blocks. So let's say that on average, during your 2 weeks, when you consistently manage to make 2 hours of calling per day or whatever, you averaged, let's say, 7 connects. Now, what is a connect? I'll explain. A connect is when the other person answers the phone and there's a exchange of conversation, right? A connect is not when they answer and then hang up on you. That is not a connect. It's not when they answer the phone. It's when they answer, you have an exchange. It doesn't matter if they say, I'm not interested, or the outcome of the call doesn't matter, as long as there's been an exchange and there's been the opportunity for you to talk to them and for them to consider what you have to offer. Just a minute or two, as long as it happened. That's a connect. So let's say that you average 7 connects. Your next evolution is, for 2 weeks, make sure you keep calling until you get 7 connects. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. And of course, keep track of what the outcomes are on those 7 connects through the call block period for at least a couple of weeks. And the third evolution is now commit to a certain number of closes. Closes are what happens when you speak with the candidate, they're interested in the position, you're interested in them, and they, the candidate, are committing to some other next step. That other next step may be different things depending on what your role is. If you're a sourcer, it may be that that person is committing to sending you a formal resume or applying on the website. If you're a recruiter, that may be that they're agreeing to a phone interview. Maybe you even schedule a phone interview. A close is not, you made an offer on that first call. A close just means that there is a commitment to another step. Apply, send resume, have another deeper call. Maybe you set up time for you and them to have a lengthier phone screen because that's part of your process. Whatever that is, that's a close. Let's say you make 3 or 4 closes for every 7 connects. On your next evolution, you're going to keep dialing until you get to those 3 closes. And then do that for a couple of weeks, add another close. Now you're going to keep dialing until you get 4 closes and 5 closes, until you get to the point where you feel really comfortable that you've got the cold calling down. So let's recap. We've got the big idea, the middle idea, and the small idea. So what is exciting about the company? What is exciting about this team? How does this job connect to the success of the company? Then you've got good news, bad news about your company, good news, bad news about their company. You know a little bit about, at least you know what the company does, that the person that you're talking to, and you know a little bit about their background. So these are the few things that you want to have in preparation. Then you're going to set up call blocks. Before you start a call block, you're going to do those 2 warm-up calls to strangers for no reason, no agenda, to kind of get you warmed up to the idea, right? And then you're going to evolve your call blocks from just get through the time to commit to a number of connects to commit to a number of closes. Do that, and in about 6 weeks, you'll be cold calling like there's no tomorrow. And let me tell you, you might think that cold calling is a thing of the past, but it's not. It sets you apart because not everybody does it. Most people now are reaching out through email and text or LinkedIn messages and they don't follow up with a call. Following up with a call shows a lot more interest. And even if they don't call you back, at the very least, they'll email you or reply to your email or text you called them. Now, here's the last piece before we go. I'm going to give you the other secret sauce here. So for this one, I don't think this is actually notated anywhere. I'm pretty sure it isn't. So make a note. Here's my last little piece of advice. When you call them, or rather before you call them, you can send a text message. The reason for that is, think about what happens when you get a call from somebody that you don't know. Most of us have cell phones. If you have an iPhone, that person has an iPhone, they might be transmitting their message ID and it might come through as their name. But most of the time when you're getting a call from someone you don't know, all you see is the phone number and you probably don't answer it. Let's face it, right? How many of you actually, if I could see your hands, how many of you raise your hand if you answer the call when you see the number, even if you don't know who it is? Most of us don't. And your candidates don't either. But if you send a text message before you call, it just says, hey, Patrick, it's Shally. I'm trying to reach you. And then put in there a little link. Like I've got my card link here. That's at the bottom of the screen there. That's free to go to carrd.co. There's a bunch of others, about me, etc. I like Card. But all you have to do is include that. And in that text message, so that when you call, the number that you texted from shows up as a known number. Your name may actually be in there because of iPhone to iPhone iMessaging. So now you actually are a known contact. What it does is it shows up as, I can't remember exactly. It says probably or likely. It's like taking a guess that this is so-and-so, but it has your name in it. So now you have a form of caller ID. It's not exactly caller ID, but it's better than nothing. So that's my little secret. Send a quick text message, very basic. Hey, Patrick, it's Shally. I'm trying to reach you. And then your little link, and then you call them. If you use a CRM that has click to call, you can probably also send a message and then click to call. If not, you can use Google Voice. You can get a free voice account and click send text message and then click dial, same number. So that is my secret sauce advice for all of you that might want to warm up your cold calls and learn how to make more cold calls. I hope you found it useful. Please do reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. There's my information there. And you can also look up our company page, Newton Talent, on LinkedIn and connect with our company. We'll be posting these videos there as soon as I figure out how to do that. Haven't figured it out yet. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you attending here today. Tell everybody about it, and we will see you next week. Have a good weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.